The Man in the Iron Mask, by Alexandre Dumas. Chapter V. Where, probably, Moliere obtained his first idea of the bourgeois gentilhomme. D'Artagnan found Porthos in the adjoining chamber, but no longer an irritated Porthos, or a disappointed Porthos, but Porthos radiant, blooming, fascinating, and chattering with Moliere, who was looking upon him with a species of idolatry, and as a man would who had not only never seen anything greater, but not even ever anything so great. Aramis went straight up to Porthos and offered him his white hand, which lost itself in the gigantic clasp of his old friend, an operation which Aramis never hazarded without a certain uneasiness; but the friendly pressure having been performed not too painfully for him, the bishop of Vannes passed over to Moliere. "Well, monsieur," said he, "will you come with me to Saint Mande?" "I will go anywhere you like, monseigneur," answered Moliere. "To Saint Mande!" cried Porthos, surprised at seeing the proud bishop of Vannes fraternizing with a journeyman tailor. "What, Aramis, are you going to take this gentleman to Saint Mande?" "Yes," said Aramis, smiling, "our work is pressing." "And besides, my dear Porthos," continued D'Artagnan, "M. Moliere is not altogether what he seems." "In what way?" asked Porthos. "Why, this gentleman is one of M. Percerin's chief clerks, and is expected at Saint Mande to try on the dresses which M. Fouquet has ordered for the Epicureans." "'Tis precisely so," said Moliere. "Yes, monsieur." "Come, then, my dear M. Moliere," said Aramis; "that is, if you have done with M. de Vallon." "We have finished," replied Porthos. "And you are satisfied?" asked D'Artagnan. "Completely so," replied Porthos. Moliere took his leave of Porthos with much ceremony, and grasped the hand which the captain of the musketeers furtively offered him. "Pray, monsieur," concluded Porthos, mincingly, "above all, be exact." "You will have your dress the day after to morrow, monsieur le baron," answered Moliere, and he left with Aramis. Then D'Artagnan, taking Porthos's arm, "What has this tailor done for you, my dear Porthos," he asked, "that you are so pleased with him?" "What has he done for me, my friend? Done for me!" cried Porthos, enthusiastically. "Yes, I ask you, what has he done for you?" "My friend, he has done that which no tailor ever yet accomplished. He has taken my measure without touching me." "Ah, bah! Tell me how he did it." "First, then, they went, I don't know where, for a number of lay figures, of all heights and sizes, hoping there would be one to suit mine; but the largest, that of the drum major of the Swiss guard, was 2 inches too short, and a half foot too narrow in the chest." "Indeed!" "It is exactly as I tell you, D'Artagnan; but he is a great man, or at the very least a great tailor, is this M. Moliere. He was not at all put at fault by the circumstance." "What did he do, then?" "Oh! it is a very simple matter. I'faith, 'tis an unheard of thing that people should have been so stupid as not to have discovered this method from the first. What annoyance and humiliation they would have spared me!" "Not to mention of the costumes, my dear Porthos." "Yes, 30 dresses." "Well, my dear Porthos, come, tell me M. Moliere's plan." "Moliere! You call him so, do you? I shall make a point of recollecting his name." "Yes, or Poquelin, if you prefer that." "No, I like Moliere best. When I wish to recollect his name, I shall think of Voliere," which is an aviary, "and as I have one at Pierrefonds " "Capital!" returned D'Artagnan. "And M. Moliere's plan?" "'Tis this: instead of pulling me to pieces, as all these rascals do, of making me bend my back and double my joints, all of them low and dishonorable practices." D'Artagnan made a sign of approbation with his head. "Monsieur," he said to me, continued Porthos, "a gentleman ought to measure himself. Do me the pleasure to draw near this glass." And I drew near the glass. I must own I did not exactly understand what this good Monsieur Voliere wanted with me. Moliere. Ah! Yes, Moliere. Moliere. And as the fear of being measured still possessed me, "Take care," said I to him, "what you are going to do with me. I am very ticklish, I warn you." But he, with his soft voice, for he is a courteous fellow, we must admit, my friend, he, with his soft voice, "Monsieur," said he, "that your dress may fit you well, it must be made according to your figure. Your figure is exactly reflected in this mirror. We shall take the measure of this reflection." "In fact," said D'Artagnan, "you saw yourself in the glass, but where did they find one in which you could see your whole figure?" "My good friend, it is the very glass in which the king is used to look to see himself." "Yes, but the king is a foot and a half shorter than you are." "Ah! Well, I know not how that may be. It is, no doubt, a cunning way of flattering the king, but the looking glass was too large for me. 'Tis true that its height was made up of 3 Venetian plates of glass, placed one above another, and its breadth of 3 similar parallelograms in juxtaposition." "Oh, Porthos, what excellent words you have command of! Where in the world did you acquire such a voluminous vocabulary?" "At Belle Isle. Aramis and I had to use such words in our strategic studies and castrametive experiments." D'Artagnan recoiled, as though the sesquipedalian syllables had knocked the breath out of his body. "Ah! very good. Let us return to the looking glass, my friend." "Then this good Monsieur Voliere " "Moliere." "Yes, Moliere, you are right. You will see now, my dear friend, that I shall recollect his name quite well. This excellent Monsieur Moliere set to work tracing out lines on the mirror, with a piece of Spanish chalk, following on all the make of my arms and my shoulders, all the while expounding this maxim, which I thought admirable: 'It is advisable that a dress should not incommode its wearer.'" "In reality," said D'Artagnan, "that is an excellent maxim, which is, unfortunately, seldom carried out in practice." "That is why I found it all the more astonishing when he expatiated upon it." "Ah! he expatiated." "Parbleu!" "Let me hear his theory." "Seeing that," he continued, "one may, in awkward circumstances, or in a troublesome position, have one's doublet on one's shoulder, and not desire to take one's doublet off." "True," said D'Artagnan. "And so," continued M. Voliere Moliere Moliere, yes. "And so," went on M. Moliere, "you want to draw your sword, monsieur, and you have your doublet on your back. What do you do?" "I take it off," I answered. "Well, no," he replied. "How no?" "I say that the dress should be so well made that it will in no way encumber you, even in drawing your sword." "Ah! ah!" "Throw yourself on guard," pursued he. I did it with such wondrous firmness that 2 panes of glass burst out of the window. "'Tis nothing, nothing," said he. "Keep your position." I raised my left arm in the air, the forearm gracefully bent, the ruffle drooping, and my wrist curved, while my right arm, half extended, securely covered my wrist with the elbow, and my breast with the wrist. "Yes," said D'Artagnan, "'tis the true guard, the academic guard." "You have said the very word, dear friend. In the meanwhile, Voliere " "Moliere." "Hold! I should certainly, after all, prefer to call him what did you say his other name was?" "Poquelin." "I prefer to call him Poquelin." "And how will you remember this name better than the other?" "You understand he calls himself Poquelin, does he not?" "Yes." if I were to call to mind Madame Coquenard." "Good." "And change coq into poke, nard into lin, and instead of Coquenard I shall have Poquelin." "'Tis wonderful!" cried D'Artagnan, astounded. "Go on, my friend, I am listening to you with admiration." "This Coquelin sketched my arm on the glass." "I beg your pardon, Poquelin." "What did I say, then?" "You said Coquelin." "Ah, true. This Poquelin, then, sketched my arm on the glass; but he took his time over it, he kept looking at me a good deal. The fact is that I must have been looking particularly handsome. 'Does it weary you?' he asked. 'A little,' I replied, bending a little in my hands, 'but I could hold out for an hour or so longer.' 'No, no, I will not allow it. The willing fellows will make it a duty to support your arms, as of old, men supported those of the Prophet.' 'Very good,' I answered. 'That will not be humiliating to you?' 'My friend,' said I, 'there is, I think, a great difference between being supported and being measured.'" "The distinction is full of the soundest sense," interrupted D'Artagnan. "Then," continued Porthos, "he made a sign, two lads approached, one supported my left arm, while the other, with infinite address, supported my right. 'Another, my man,' cried he. A third approached. 'Support monsieur by the waist,' said he. The garcon complied." "So that you were at rest?" asked D'Artagnan. "Perfectly; and Coquenard drew me on the glass." "Poquelin, my friend." "Poquelin, you are right. Stay, decidedly I prefer calling him Voliere." "Yes; and then it was over, wasn't it?" "During that time Voliere drew me as I appeared in the mirror." "'Twas delicate in him." "I much like the plan; it is respectful, and keeps every one in his place." "And there it ended?" "Without a soul having touched me, my friend." "Except the three garcons who supported you?" "Doubtless; but I have, I think, already explained to you the difference there is between supporting and measuring." "'Tis true," answered D'Artagnan, who said afterwards to himself, "In faith, I greatly deceive myself, or I have been the means of a good windfall to that rascal Moliere, and we shall assuredly see the scene hit off to the life, in some comedy or other." Porthos smiled. "What are you laughing at?" asked D'Artagnan. "Must I confess? Well, I was laughing over my good fortune." "Oh, that is true; I don't know a happier man than you. But what is this last piece of luck that has befallen you?" "Well, my dear fellow, congratulate me." "I desire nothing better." "It seems that I am the first who has had his measure taken in that manner." "Are you so sure of it?" "Nearly so. Certain signs of intelligence which passed between Voliere and the other garcons showed me the fact." "Well, my friend, that does not surprise me from Moliere," said D'Artagnan. "Voliere, my friend." "Oh, no, no, indeed. I am very willing to leave you to go on saying Voliere; but as for me, I shall continue to say Moliere. Well, this, I was saying, does not surprise me, coming from Moliere, who is a very ingenious fellow, and inspired you with this grand idea." "It will be of great use to him by and by, I am sure." "Won't it be of use to him, indeed? I believe you it will, and that in the highest degree; for, you see, my friend Moliere is of all known tailors the man who best clothes our barons, comtes, and marquises, according to their measure." On this observation, neither the application nor depth of which we shall discuss, D'Artagnan and Porthos quitted M. de Percerin's house, and rejoined their carriages, wherein we will leave them, in order to look after Moliere and Aramis at Saint Mande. Chapter VI. The Beehive, the Bees, and the Honey. The bishop of Vannes, much annoyed at having met D'Artagnan at M. Percerin's, returned to Saint Mande in no very good humor. Moliere, on the other hand, quite delighted at having made such a capital rough sketch, and at knowing where to find the original again, whenever he should desire to convert his sketch into a picture, Moliere arrived in the merriest of moods. All the first story of the left wing was occupied by the most celebrated Epicureans in Paris, and those on the freest footing in the house, every one in his compartment, like the bees in their cells, employed in producing the honey intended for that royal cake which M. Fouquet proposed to offer his Majesty Louis XIV during the fete at Vaux. Pelisson, his head leaning on his hand, was engaged in drawing out the plan of the prologue to the Facheux, a comedy in 3 acts, which was to be put on the stage by Poquelin de Moliere, as D'Artagnan called him, or Coquelin de Foliere, as Porthos styled him. Loret, with all the charming innocence of a gazetteer, the gazetteers of all ages have always been so artless, Loret was composing an account of the fetes at Vaux, before those fetes had taken place. La Fontaine sauntered about from one to the other, a peripatetic, absent-minded, boring, unbearable dreamer, who kept buzzing and humming at everybody's elbow 1,000 poetic abstractions. He so often disturbed Pelisson, that the latter, raising his head, crossly said, "At least, La Fontaine, supply me with a rhyme, since you have the run of the gardens at Parnassus." "What rhyme do you want?" asked the fabler, as Madame de Sevigne used to call him. "I want a rhyme to Lumiere." "Orniere," answered La Fontaine. "Ah, but my good friend, one cannot talk of wheel ruts when celebrating the delights of Vaux," said Loret. "Besides, it doesn't rhyme," answered Pelisson. "What! doesn't rhyme?" cried La Fontaine in surprise. "Yes, you have an abominable habit, my friend, a habit which will ever prevent your becoming a poet of the first order. You rhyme in a slovenly manner." "Oh, oh, you think so, do you, Pelisson?" "Yes, I do, indeed. Remember that a rhyme is never good so long as one can find a better." "Then I will never write anything again save in prose," said La Fontaine, who had taken up Pelisson's reproach in earnest. "Ah, I often suspected I was nothing but a rascally poet. Yes, 'tis the very truth." "Do not say so; your remark is too sweeping, and there is much that is good in your fables." "And to begin," continued La Fontaine, following up his idea, "I will go and burn 100 verses I have just made." "Where are your verses?" "In my head." "Well, if they are in your head, you cannot burn them." "True," said La Fontaine; "but if I do not burn them, well, what will happen if you do not burn them?" "They will remain in my mind, and I shall never forget them." "The deuce!" cried Loret. "What a dangerous thing! One would go mad with it." "The deuce! the deuce!" repeated La Fontaine. "What can I do?" "I have discovered the way," said Moliere, who had entered just at this point of the conversation. "What way?" "Write them first, and burn them afterwards." "How simple! Well, I should never have discovered that. What a mind that devil of a Moliere has!" said La Fontaine. Then, striking his forehead, "Oh, thou wilt never be aught but an ass, Jean La Fontaine," he added. "What are you saying there, my friend?" broke in Moliere, approaching the poet, whose aside he had heard. "I say I shall never be aught but an ass," answered La Fontaine, with a heavy sigh and swimming eyes. "Yes, my friend," he added, with increasing grief, "it means that I rhyme in a slovenly manner." "Oh, 'tis wrong to say so." "Nay, I am a poor creature." "Who said so?" "Parbleu! 'twas Pelisson, did you not, Pelisson?" Pelisson, again absorbed in his work, took good care not to answer.
"But if Pelisson said you were so?" cried Moliere. "Pelisson has seriously offended you."
"Do you think so?"
"Ah! I advise you, as you are a gentleman, not to leave an insult like that unpunished."
"What?" exclaimed La Fontaine.
"Did you ever fight?"
"Once only, with the lieutenant in the light horse."
"What wrong had he done you?"
"It seems he ran away with my wife."
"Ah! ah!" said Moliere, becoming slightly pale; but as, at La Fontaine's declaration, the others had turned round, Moliere kept upon his lips the rallying smile which had so nearly died away, and continuing to make La Fontaine speak: "And what was the result of the duel?"
"The result was, that on the ground my opponent disarmed me, and then made an apology, promising never again to set foot in my house."
"And you consider yourself satisfied?"
said Moliere. "Not at all. On the contrary, I picked up my sword. 'I beg your pardon, monsieur,' I said. 'I have not fought you because you were my wife's friend, but because I was told I ought to fight. So, as I have never known any peace save since you made her acquaintance, do me the pleasure to continue your visits as heretofore, or, morbleu, let us set to again.' And so," continued La Fontaine, "he was compelled to resume his friendship with Madame, and I continue to be the happiest of husbands." All burst out laughing. Moliere alone passed his hand across his eyes. Why? Perhaps to wipe away a tear, perhaps to smother a sigh. Alas, we know that Moliere was a moralist, but he was not a philosopher.
"'Tis all one," he said, returning to the topic of the conversation. "Pelisson has insulted you."
"Ah, truly, I had already forgotten it."
"And I am going to challenge him on your behalf."
"Well, you can do so, if you think it indispensable."
"I do think it indispensable, and I am going to—"
"Stay!" exclaimed La Fontaine. "I want your advice."
"Upon what? This insult?"
"No, tell me really now whether lumiere does not rhyme with orniere."
"I should make them rhyme."
"Ah! I knew you would."
"And I have made 100,000 such rhymes in my time."
100,000!" cried La Fontaine; "4 times as many as La Pucelle, which M. Chaplain is meditating. Is it also on this subject, too, that you have composed 100,000 verses?"
"Listen to me, you eternally absent minded creature," said Moliere.
"It is certain," continued La Fontaine, "that legume, for instance, rhymes with posthume."
"In the plural, above all."
"Yes, above all in the plural, seeing that then it rhymes not with 3 letters, but with 4, as orniere does with lumiere." "But give me orniere and lumiere in the plural, my dear Pelisson," said La Fontaine, clapping his hand on the shoulder of his friend, whose insult he had quite forgotten, "and they will rhyme." "Hem!" coughed Pelisson. "Moliere says so, and Moliere is a judge of such things; he declares he has himself made 100,000 verses."
"Come," said Moliere, laughing, "he is off now."
"It is like rivage, which rhymes admirably with herbage. I would take my oath of it."
"But,"
said Moliere. "I tell you all this," continued La Fontaine, "because you are preparing a divertissement for Vaux, are you not?"
"Yes, the Facheux."
"Oh, yes, the Facheux; yes, I recollect. Well, I was thinking a prologue would admirably suit your divertissement."
"Doubtless it would suit capitally."
"Ah! you are of my opinion?"
"So much so, that I have asked you to write this very prologue."
"You asked me to write it?"
"Yes, you; and on your refusal begged you to ask Pelisson, who is engaged upon it at this moment."
"Ah! that is what Pelisson is doing, then. In faith, my dear Moliere, you are indeed often right."
"When?"
"When you call me absent minded. It is a monstrous defect.
I will cure myself of it, and do your prologue for you."
"But inasmuch as Pelisson is about it."
"Ah, true. Miserable rascal that I am! Loret was indeed right in saying I was a poor creature."
"It was not Loret who said so, my friend."
"Well, then, whoever said so, 'tis the same to me. And so your divertissement is called the Facheux? Well, can you make heureux rhyme with Facheux?"
"If obliged, yes."
"And even with capriceux?"
"Oh, no, no."
"It would be hazardous, and yet why so?"
"There is too great a difference in the cadences."
"I was fancying," said La Fontaine, leaving Moliere for Loret, "I was fancying—" "What were you fancying?" said Loret in the middle of a sentence. "Make haste." "You are writing the prologue to the Facheux, are you not?"
"No, mordieu! It is Pelisson."
"Ah! Pelisson!" cried La Fontaine, going over to him. "I was fancying," he continued, "that the nymph of Vaux—" "Ah! beautiful!" cried Loret. "The nymph of Vaux! Thank you, La Fontaine; you have just given me the two concluding verses of my paper." "Well, if you can rhyme so well, La Fontaine," said Pelisson, "tell me now in what way you would begin my prologue." "I should say, for instance, 'O nymph who—' After who I should place a verb in the second person singular of the present indicative, and should go on thus: 'This grotte profound.'" "But the verb, the verb?" asked Pelisson. "'To admire the greatest king of all kings round,'" continued La Fontaine. "But the verb, the verb," obstinately insisted Pelisson. "This second person in singular of the present indicative?" "Well, then, quittest. 'O nymph, who quittest now this grotte profound, to admire the greatest king of all kings round.'"
"You would not put 'who quittest,' would you?"
"Why not?"
"Quittest after 'you who'?"
"Ah, my dear fellow," exclaimed La Fontaine, "you are a shocking pedant."
"Without counting," said Moliere, "that the second verse, 'king of all kings round,' is very weak, my dear La Fontaine."
"Then you see I am nothing but a poor creature, a shuffler, as you said."
"I never said so."
"Then, as Loret said."
"And it was not Loret either, it was Pelisson."
"Well, Pelisson was right 100 times over; but what annoys me more than anything, my dear Moliere, is, that I fear we shall not have our Epicurean dresses."
"You expected yours, then, for the fete?"
"Yes, for the fete, and then for after the fete. My housekeeper told me that my own is rather faded."
"Diable! Your housekeeper is right, rather more than faded."
"Ah, you see," returned La Fontaine, "the fact is, I left it on the floor in my room, and my cat—"
"Well, your cat?"
"She made her nest upon it, which has rather changed its color." Moliere burst out laughing. Pelisson and Loret followed his example. At this juncture the bishop of Vannes appeared, with a roll of plans and parchments under his arm. As if the angel of death had chilled all gay and sprightly fancies, as if that wan form had scared away the graces to whom Xenocrates sacrificed, silence immediately reigned through the study, and every one resumed his self possession and his pen. Aramis distributed the notes of invitation, and thanked them in the name of M. Fouquet. "The superintendent," he said, "being kept to his room by business, could not come and see them, but begged them to send him some of the fruits of their day's work, to enable him to forget the fatigue of his labor in the night." At these words all settled down to work. La Fontaine placed himself at a table, and set his rapid pen an endless dance across the smooth white vellum. Pelisson made a fair copy of his prologue. Moliere contributed 50 fresh verses, with which his visit to Percerin had inspired him, Loret, an article on the marvelous fetes he predicted, and Aramis, laden with his booty like the king of the bees, that great black drone, decked with purple and gold, re entered his apartment, silent and busy. But before departing, "Remember, gentlemen," said he, "we leave to morrow evening."
"In that case, I must give notice at home," said Moliere.
"Yes, poor Moliere," said Loret, smiling, "he loves his home."
"He loves, yes," replied Moliere, with his sad, sweet smile, "he loves. That does not mean they love him."
"As for me," said La Fontaine, "they love me at Chateau Thierry, I am very sure." Aramis here re entered after a brief disappearance. "Will any one go with me?" he asked. "I am going by Paris, after having passed a quarter of an hour with M. Fouquet. I offer my carriage."
"Good," said Moliere. "I accept it. I am in a hurry."
"I shall dine here," said Loret. "M. de Gourville has promised me some crawfish."
"He has promised me some whitings. Find a rhyme for that, La Fontaine."
Aramis went out laughing, as only he could laugh, and Moliere followed him. They were at the bottom of the stairs when La Fontaine opened the door, and shouted out, "He has promised us some whitings in return for these our writings." The shouts of laughter reached the ears of Fouquet at the moment Aramis opened the door of his study. As to Moliere, he had undertaken to order the horses, while Aramis went to exchange a parting word with the superintendent. "Oh, how they are laughing there!" said Fouquet, with a laugh. "Do you not laugh, monseigneur?" "I laugh no longer now, Monsieur d'Herblay. The fete is approaching, money is departing." "Have I not told you that that was my business?" "Yes, you promised me millions." "You shall have them the day after the king's entree into Vaux." Fouquet looked closely at Aramis, and passed the back of his icy hand across his moistened brow. Aramis perceived that the superintendent either doubted him, or felt he was powerless to obtain the money. How could Fouquet suppose that a poor bishop, ex abbe, ex musketeer, could find any? "Why doubt me?" said Aramis. Fouquet smiled and shook his head. "Man of little faith," added the bishop. "My dear Monsieur d'Herblay," answered Fouquet, "if I fall " "Well, if you fall?" "I shall at least fall from such a height that I shall shatter myself in falling." Then giving himself a shake, as though to escape from himself, "Whence came you," said he, "my friend?" "From Paris, from Percerin." "And what have you been doing at Percerin's? For I suppose you attach no great importance to our poet's dresses." "No, I went to prepare a surprise." "Surprise?" "Yes, which you are going to give to the king." "And will it cost much?" "Oh, 100 pistoles you will give Lebrun." "A painting! Ah! all the better. And what is this painting to represent?" "I will tell you. Then, at the same time, whatever you may say or think of it, I went to see the dresses for our poets." "Bah! and they will be rich and elegant?" "Splendid! There will be few great monseigneurs with so good. People will see the difference there is between the courtiers of wealth and those of friendship." "Ever generous and grateful, dear prelate." "In your school." Fouquet grasped his hand. "And where are you going?" he said. "I am off to Paris, when you shall have given a certain letter." "For whom?" "Monsieur de Lyonne." "And what do you want with Lyonne?" "I wish to make him sign a lettre de cachet." "Lettre de cachet! Do you desire to put somebody in the Bastille?" "On the contrary, to let somebody out."
"And who?"
"A poor devil, a youth,
a lad who has been Bastille these 10 years, for 2 Latin verses he made against the Jesuits." "2 Latin verses! And for 2 Latin verses the miserable being has been imprisoned for 10 years." "Yes." "And has committed no other crime?" "Beyond this, he is as innocent as you or I." "On your word?" "On my honor." "And his name is?" "Seldon." "Yes. But it is too bad. You knew this, and you never told me." "'Twas only yesterday his mother applied to me, monseigneur." "And the woman is poor?" "In the deepest misery." "Heaven," said Fouquet, "sometimes bears with such injustice on earth, that I hardly wonder there are wretches who doubt of its existence. Stay, Monsieur d'Herblay." And Fouquet, taking a pen, wrote a few rapid lines to his colleague Lyonne. Aramis took the letter, and made ready to go. "Wait," said Fouquet. He opened his drawer, and took out 10 government notes which were there, each for 1,000 francs. "Stay," he said, "set the son at liberty, and give this to the mother; but above all, do not tell her—" "What, monseigneur?" "That she is 10,000 livres richer than I. She would say I am but a poor superintendent. Go, and I pray that God will bless those who are mindful of his poor." "So also do I pray," replied Aramis, kissing Fouquet's hand. And he went out quickly, carrying off the letter for Lyonne and the notes for Seldon's mother, and taking up Moliere, who was beginning to lose patience. Chapter 7. Another supper at the Bastille. 7 o'clock sounded from the great clock of the Bastille, that famous clock, which, like all the accessories of the state prison, the very use of which is a torture, recalled to the prisoners' minds the destination of every hour of their punishment. The timepiece of the Bastille, adorned with figures, like most of the clocks of the period, represented St. Peter in bonds. It was the supper hour of the unfortunate captives. The doors, grating on their enormous hinges, opened for the passage of the baskets and trays of provisions, the abundance and the delicacy of which, as M. de Baisemeaux has himself taught us, was regulated by the condition in life of the prisoner. We understand on this head the theories of M. de Baisemeaux, sovereign dispenser of gastronomic delicacies, head cook of the royal fortress, whose trays full laden were ascending the steep staircases, carrying some consolation to the prisoners in the shape of honestly filled bottles of good vintages. The same hour was that of M. le Gouverneur's supper also. He had a guest to day, and the spit turned more heavily than usual. Roast partridges, flanked with quails and flanking a larded leveret, boiled fowls, hams, fried and sprinkled with white wine, cardons of guipuscoa, and la bisque écrevisse, these, together with soups and hors d'oeuvres, constituted the governor's bill of fare. Baisemeaux, seated at table, was rubbing his hands and looking at the Bishop of Vannes, who, booted like a cavalier, dressed in gray and sword at side, kept talking of his hunger and testifying the liveliest impatience. M. de Baisemeaux de Montlezun was not accustomed to the unbending movements of his greatness my lord of Vannes, and this evening Aramis, becoming sprightly, volunteered confidence on confidence. The prelate had again a little touch of the musketeer about him. The bishop just trenched on the borders only of license in his style of conversation. As for M. de Baisemeaux, with the facility of vulgar people, he gave himself up entirely upon this point of his guest's freedom. "Monsieur," said he, "for indeed to night I dare not call you monseigneur." "By no means," said Aramis; "call me monsieur, I am booted." "Do you know, monsieur, of whom you remind me this evening?" "No, faith," said Aramis, taking up his glass; "but I hope I remind you of a capital guest." "You remind me of two, monsieur." Francois, shut the window, the wind may annoy his greatness." "And let him go," added Aramis. "The supper is completely served, and we shall eat it very well without waiters. I like exceedingly to be tete a tete when I am with a friend." Baisemeaux bowed respectfully. "I like exceedingly," continued Aramis, "to help myself." "Retire, Francois," cried Baisemeaux. "I was saying that your greatness puts me in mind of two persons, one very illustrious, the late cardinal, the great Cardinal de la Rochelle, who wore boots like you." "Indeed," said Aramis; "and the other?" "The other was a certain musketeer, very handsome, very brave, very adventurous, very fortunate, who from being abbe turned musketeer, and from musketeer turned abbe." Aramis condescended to smile. "From abbe," continued Baisemeaux, encouraged by Aramis's smile, "from abbe, bishop, and from bishop " "Ah! stay there, I beg," exclaimed Aramis. "I have just said, monsieur, that you gave me the idea of a cardinal." "Enough, dear Monsieur Baisemeaux. As you said, I have on the boots of a cavalier; but I do not intend, for all that, to embroil myself with the church this evening." "But you have wicked intentions, nevertheless, monseigneur." "Oh, yes, wicked, I own, as everything mundane is." "You traverse the town and the streets in disguise?" "In disguise, as you say." "And you still make use of your sword?" "Yes, I should think so, but only when I am compelled. Do me the pleasure to summon Francois." "Have you no wine there?" "'Tis not for wine, but because it is hot here, and the window is shut." "I shut the windows at supper time, so as not to hear the sounds of the arrival of couriers." "Ah, yes. You hear them when the window is open?" "But too well, and that disturbs me. You understand." "Nevertheless, I am suffocated. Francois." Francois entered. "Open the windows, I pray you, Master Francois," said Aramis. "You will allow him, dear Monsieur Baisemeaux?" "You are at home here," answered the governor. The window was opened. "Do you not think," said M. de Baisemeaux, "that you will find yourself very lonely, now M. de la Fere has returned to his household gods at Blois? He is a very old friend, is he not?" "You know it as I do, Baisemeaux, seeing that you were in the musketeers with us." "Bah! with my friends I reckon neither bottles of wine nor years." "And you are right; but I do more than love M. de la Fere, dear Baisemeaux, I venerate him." "Well, for my part, though 'tis singular," said the governor, "I prefer M. d'Artagnan to him. There is a man for you, who drinks long and well; that kind of people allow you at least to penetrate their thoughts." "Baisemeaux, make me tipsy to night; let us have a merry time of it as of old; and if I have a trouble at the bottom of my heart, I promise you, you shall see it as you would a diamond in the bottom of your glass." "Bravo!" said Baisemeaux; and he poured out a great glass of wine and drank it off at a draught, trembling with joy at the idea of being, by hook or by crook, in the secret of some high archiepiscopal misdemeanor. While he was drinking, he did not see with what attention Aramis was noting the sounds in the great court. A courier came in about 8 o'clock, as Francois brought in the fifth bottle, and although the courier made a great noise, Baisemeaux heard nothing. "The devil take him!" said Aramis. "What? Who?" asked Baisemeaux. "I hope 'tis neither the wine you drank, nor he who is the cause of your drinking it." "No, it is a horse, who is making noise enough in the court for a whole squadron." "Pooh! some courier or other," replied the governor, redoubling his attention to the passing bottle. "Yes, and may the devil take him!
and so quickly that we shall never hear him speak more. Hurrah, hurrah!"
"You forget me, Baisemeaux; my glass is empty," said Aramis, lifting his dazzling Venetian goblet.
"Upon my honor, you delight me. Francois, wine."
Francois entered.
"Wine, fellow, and better."
"Yes, monsieur, yes; but a courier has just arrived."
"Let him go to the devil, I say."
"Yes, monsieur, but "
"Let him leave his news at the office. We will see to it tomorrow. Tomorrow, there will be time tomorrow, there will be daylight," said Baisemeaux, chanting the words.
"Ah, monsieur," grumbled the soldier Francois, in spite of himself, "monsieur!" "Take care," said Aramis, "take care."
"Of what, dear Monsieur d'Herblay?"
said Baisemeaux, half intoxicated. "The letter which the courier brings to the governor of a fortress is sometimes an order."
"Nearly always."
"Do not orders issue from the ministers?"
"Yes, undoubtedly, but "
"And what do these ministers do but countersign the signature of the king?"
"Perhaps you are right. Nevertheless, 'tis very tiresome when you are sitting before a good table, tete a tete with a friend. Ah! I beg your pardon, monsieur. I forgot it is I who engage you at supper, and that I speak to a future cardinal."
"Let us pass over that, dear Baisemeaux, and return to our soldier, to Francois."
"Well, and what has Francois done?"
"He has demurred."
"He was wrong, then?"
"However, he has demurred, you see; 'tis because there is something extraordinary in this matter. It is very possible that it was not Francois who was wrong in demurring, but you, who are in the wrong in not listening to him."
"Wrong? I to be wrong before Francois? That seems rather hard."
"Pardon me, merely an irregularity; but I thought it my duty to make an observation which I deem important."
"Oh, oh, perhaps you are right,"
stammered Baisemeaux.
"The king's order is sacred; but as to orders that arrive when one is at supper, I repeat that the devil "
"If you had said as much to the great cardinal, my dear Baisemeaux, and if his order had any importance "
"I do it that I may not disturb a bishop. Mordioux! Am I not, then, excusable?"
"Do not forget, Baisemeaux, that I have worn the soldier's coat, and I am accustomed to obedience everywhere."
"You wish, then "
"I wish that you would do your duty, my friend; yes, at least before this soldier."
"'Tis mathematically true,"
exclaimed Baisemeaux. Francois still waited.
"Let them send this order of the king's up to me,"
he repeated, recovering himself. And he added in a low tone, "Do you know what it is? I will tell you something about as interesting as this.
Beware of fire near the powder magazine; or, look close after such and such a one, who is clever at escaping. Ah! if you only knew, monseigneur, how many times I have been suddenly awakened from the very sweetest, deepest slumber, by messengers arriving at full gallop to tell me, or rather bring me a slip of paper containing these words, 'Monsieur de Baisemeaux, what news?' 'Tis clear enough that those who waste their time writing such orders have never slept in the Bastile. They would know better. They have never considered the thickness of my walls, the vigilance of my officers, the number of rounds we go. But, indeed, what can you expect, monseigneur? It is their business to write and torment me when I am at rest, and to trouble me when I am happy," added Baisemeaux, bowing to Aramis. "Then let them do their business."
"And do you do yours?" added the bishop, smiling. Francois re entered. Baisemeaux took from his hands the minister's order. He slowly undid it, and as slowly read it. Aramis pretended to be drinking, so as to be able to watch his host through the glass. Then, Baisemeaux, having read it,
What was I just saying?" he exclaimed.
"What is it?" asked the bishop.
"An order of release. There now, excellent news indeed to disturb us."
"Excellent news for him whom it concerns, you will at least agree, my dear governor."
"And at 8 o'clock in the evening."
"It is charitable."
"Oh, charity is all very well, but it is for that fellow who says he is so weary and tired, but not for me, who am amusing myself," said Baisemeaux, exasperated.
"Will you lose by him, then? And is the prisoner who is to be set at liberty a good payer?"
"Oh, yes, indeed, a miserable 5 franc rat."
"Let me see it," asked M. d'Herblay. "It is no indiscretion?" "By no means; read it." "There is urgent on the paper; you have seen that, I suppose?"
"Oh, admirable! Urgent! A man who has been there 10 years. It is urgent to set him free to day, this very evening, at 8 o'clock. Urgent!"
And Baisemeaux, shrugging his shoulders with an air of supreme disdain, flung the order on the table and began eating again.
"They are fond of these tricks," he said, with his mouth full. "They seize a man some fine day, keep him under lock and key for 10 years, and write to you, 'Watch this fellow well,' or 'Keep him very strictly;' and then, as soon as you are accustomed to look upon the prisoner as a dangerous man, all of a sudden, without rhyme or reason, they write, 'Set him at liberty,' and actually add to their missive, 'Urgent.' You will own, my lord, 'tis enough to make a man at dinner shrug his shoulders."
"What do you expect? It is for them to write," said Aramis, "for you to execute the order."
"Good, good. Execute it. Oh, patience! You must not imagine that I am a slave."
"Gracious heaven! My very good Monsieur Baisemeaux, who ever said so? Your independence is well known."
"Thank Heaven!"
"But your goodness of heart is also known."
"Ah! don't speak of it."
"And your obedience to your superiors. Once a soldier, you see, Baisemeaux, always a soldier."
"And I shall directly obey; and tomorrow morning at daybreak the prisoner referred to shall be set free."
"Tomorrow?"
"At dawn."
"Why not this evening, seeing that the lettre de cachet bears, both on the direction and inside, urgent?"
"Because this evening we are at supper, and our affairs are urgent too."
"Dear Baisemeaux, booted though I be, I feel myself a priest, and charity has higher claims upon me than hunger and thirst. This unfortunate man has suffered long enough, since you have just told me that he has been your prisoner these 10 years. Abridge his suffering. His good time has come; give him the benefit quickly. God will repay you in paradise with years of felicity."
"You wish it?"
"I entreat you." "What! in the very middle of our repast?" "I implore you; such an action is worth 10 benedicites."
"It shall be as you desire; only our supper will get cold."
"Oh! never heed that." Baisemeaux leaned back to ring for Francois, and by a very natural motion turned round towards the door. The order had remained on the table. Aramis seized the opportunity when Baisemeaux was not looking to change the paper for another, folded in the same manner, which he drew swiftly from his pocket.
"Francois," said the governor, "let the major come up here with the turnkeys of the Bertaudiere."
Francois bowed and quitted the room, leaving the two companions alone.